What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Locked On Pirates podcast. I am, of course, your host who does the most, Ethan Smith. Hope you all are having a phenomenal Wednesday, February 16th. I hope, again, the month of February has treated you well. We last talked to you on Monday with Gary Morgan about, CBA stuff, all that fun jazz, everything that that's going on in the world of baseball. But on today's episode, we're going to predict the opening day starting rotation for the Pittsburgh Pirates. We're also going to talk about what pitchers need to make the most impact to help the staff as a whole, and unexpected names that could help improve this pitching staff of the Pittsburgh Pirates that is a lot deeper this year than it was last year. Of course, thank you for making me your first listen of the day every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. You can listen every day where you find your podcasts on YouTube, Spotify, Odyssey, Google Play, and more. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan, and make sure you follow this podcast on Twitter at Locked On Pirates. And when the music hits, it's time to get real. So let's have a fun Wednesday, February 16th episode.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, everyone, and welcome back to the Locked On Pirates podcast. Hope you all are having a phenomenal day. I am, of course, your host, Ethan Smith, who does the most, and we are back here on Wednesday, February 16th to talk some pitching again. And pitching, of course, has been one of the focuses of this team this offseason with the acquisitions of Zach Thompson and Kyle Nicholas from the Miami Marlins in the Jacob Stallings trade, as well as picking up Jose Quintana before the lockout began. So the Pirates have put a heavy emphasis on pitching depth. Now, of course, 2021, that was a big issue for the Pittsburgh Pirates and Derek Shelton to really combat. But I think this upcoming year in 2022, however long the season may be or whenever we are getting baseball, it's going to be a very interesting pitching staff to look forward to and to look around. And it's very fun as well because you have the idea that now that the Pirates are going to have options, that doesn't necessarily mean that the guys that I'm predicting to be in the opening day starting rotation are going to be there for the long haul, because you're really going to have to fight for your spot in this 5 or 6 man rotation this year. But let's get right into the opening day rotation predictions here for me. Now, of course, I tweeted out yesterday the RotoChamp/Fangraphs predictions, which right now, of course, have Jose Quintana, Jonathan Brubaker, Zach Thompson, Dylan Peters, and Bryce Wilson. Of course, JT Brubaker, his first name is Jonathan. Now, one thing that you look at from the 2021 stats is every single pitcher in this rotation has an ERA above a 4. All of their whips are above a 1.3, and only 2 of them had more than 100 strikeouts on the year, which were JT Brubaker and Quintana. But I mostly agree with that for the most part. I think Jose Quintana was brought in to be a top 3 starter for this team, and he obviously will probably do so, and I would expect him to do so because that's what he was brought in for. So I think Jose Quintana definitely has a spot. JT Brubaker as well. He showed last year that he will also have a spot in the starting rotation. So I think that's 2 of your spots. Mitch Keller, probably going to be in there as well. I don't think he'll be like a top 3 guy. He'll probably be a bottom of the rotation guy, which is perfectly fine. But I think, and we'll talk about this later, I think him improving the most would help this staff improve the most. Then you have Zach Thompson, who, of course, they acquired in the Jacob Stallings trade. I think this one is a pretty sure lock as well. Zach Thompson, a lot like Bryce Wilson, who you already have heard my praises for Bryce Wilson from last year. Zach Thompson was a lot like Bryce Wilson last year. He was kind of buried in a very strong rotation in Miami that had Sandy Alcantara and some other very popular names, and Pablo Lopez as well down there for the Miami Marlins. Make sure you go check out Peter Pratt of Locked On Marlins. He does a phenomenal job across the pond. But Zach Thompson was kind of a product of that as well. And, at the end of the day, that's kind of what I think the Pirates are trying to build here, is they're trying to say, hey, if you are not pitching well, you're going to have to fight for your spot to pitch and start these games. And I think that's one thing you're going to see in 2022 a lot. Because now, to mention Dylan Peters as well, who had, not a terrible year, 4-5, 4.80 record, or 4.80 ERA, 1.43 WHIP, 63 Ks, 27 strikeouts, not terrible. But at the end of the day, you're going to have a lot of guys knocking on the door heading into this year. Now, of course, we already saw one in Roansy Contreras last year. He's going to definitely be a integral part of what I think this rotation is going to do. If we, by some miracle, do get a full season, I definitely think that Roansy would fit himself in about a month or two after that. There's a chance that if spring training was happening, that I think he could get the nod, but I don't think he will. I think they're going to want him to get a little bit of time in AAA, much like O'Neal Cruz, who I've already mentioned as well, and a lot of people want to see O'Neal Cruz, but I definitely think you're going to probably get Roansy and O'Neal Cruz at AAA to begin the year, which, of course, if the lockout does not end, neither of them can play because they are on the 40-man roster, which is very unfortunate as well. But at the end of the day, whenever those players are allowed to play, I think that's where Roansy will start. But there's some other names that you really got to keep a lookout for. For some reason, Pirates fans have really just forgot that Miguel Yajure even existed, and he was a part of that Jameson Taillon deal as well that brought Roansy Contreras and as well Miguel Yajure to the Pittsburgh Pirates. And I mean, Miguel Yajure, again, didn't look too bad in the stints that he had. I mean, you look at what Miguel Yajure was able to do before he went down with an injury. Right-handed pitcher, 23 years old. I mean, you look across his career. I mean, he had a 1.29 ERA with the Yankees in 2020. In 3 games. Of course, he struggled a little bit more in Pittsburgh, but his K walk rate was not terrible. 11 Ks to 7 walks. You'd like to see that go down. But I think Yajure, rehabbing from that injury, he's a guy you got to watch for the starting rotation that could eventually, kind of cradle up that ladder a little bit and maybe fit himself in there. And then Gary mentioned a guy as well a little bit ago on this podcast in Cody Bolton. Now, Cody Bolton is an interesting case because you look at what he's been able to do. He's been in the system for 3 years now, and he had a 3.16 ERA in rookie ball in 2017. Kind of shaky, but it is what it is. A 3.65 in West Virginia when the West Virginia Power were still their single-A team. And then he had 2 teams that he played with in 2019, which were Bradenton and Altoona, where he was 8-6 with a 3.28. Now, Cody Bolton, he's kind of one of those guys that's flown under the radar a little bit, especially with some of the acquisitions of some of these strong pitchers and the guys that you have at the top of the prospect list, like Quinn Priester, Carmen Majinski, Brennan Malone, guys like that, Jared Jones, even to name him as well. But at the end of the day, Cody Bolton, he should be up in the majors this upcoming year. I would definitely expect him to be. Now, is he going to start? That's kind of where you get a little shaky on that. I don't think he is going to start right away, but there's a possibility with injuries, a possibility with a lot of different things that he could start. But if I had to predict what the opening day rotation would be, I would go with what RotoChamp said. I'd say Jose Quintana will probably be the opening day starter. Maybe JT Brubaker, just depends on how Derek Shelton feels that day. But those two will definitely be in the top 2. I think Zach Thompson and Bryce Wilson will be 3 and 4. Now, obviously, these numbers don't mean that much. I just think that they're going to be those guys that are going to be in the rotation. And then I think Mitch Keller and Dylan Peters will round it out in a 6-man rotation. Now, of course, if Shelton wants to go with 5, I think Keller gets a nod over Peters due to pure age in general. And they need, realistically, this is the last year that Mitch Keller really has to make an impact and make a real case that he is a good pitcher for this team, or they may have to move on. But before we get into what pitchers need to make the most impact here for the Pittsburgh Pirates heading into 2022 to improve the staff, how about we talk about improving on what protein bars you have? Well, Built Bar, of course, is the best tasting protein bar on the planet. Built Bars are absolutely phenomenal. And have you tried the Puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of the best Built Bars, best tasting bars. Puffs are the first ever protein infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy. They're not just a protein bar, they're a treat. And they're recovered in 100% real chocolate. Puffs are a fan favorite with some incredible flavors. You have cinnamon churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie, and many more. These are going to be your new favorite. Of course, as mentioned already, all Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. Yes, that is in Puffs included. Go to Built.com right now and scroll down to the macros chart. You'll be blown away. They have high protein, low calories, high fiber, and low carbs. For exact numbers, they have 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar and net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Built Bar also has 9 unique different flavors that they have all the time. And if you want to try them, Try out a mix box. They're very good. Mint brownie coconut almond will be in there. And, of course, white chocolate cookies and cream is new this month. So make sure you go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15, and get 15% off of your next order when you use the promo code LOCKEDON to invest in the best protein bars on the planet. Now, we already went over my predictions for the opening day starting rotation, but now this is where things, the opening day starting rotation is going to mean something, right? It's going to mean something. But at the end of the day, how will this help the staff as a whole? Now, when you're looking at impacts of the players who need to make the most impact, as I mentioned here on YouTube, you see it at the bottom of the screen right there, you got to talk about the guys that you are looking at for the Pittsburgh Pirates when this team is going to be contending in a couple years, say like 2 years maybe. Who are you going to look at in this roster, in this pitching staff right now, 1 through 5, and say, okay, this guy needs to make the most impact so that he can be an integral part of what this team is trying to do for the foreseeable future? Now, that's, of course, a phenomenal case because at the end of the day, Jose Quintana is not integral to what this team is trying to do 2, 3, 4 years from now. Would it be nice to have him do well? Yes, because then I think it's a Tyler Anderson situation where you move him to the deadline, pick up some more pitchers, pick up, whatever you need in the system, and I think that's a really good thing that he can offer. Now, of course, you would like to see him pitch well, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really affect the future that much. Now, when you're talking about JT Brubaker, kind of. I think JT Brubaker right now is just a product of the starting rotation not having a lot of these guys ready yet. I definitely think when Priester, Majinski, and those guys come up, it's going to be kind of tough for JT Brubaker to hold his spot. He's not bad. He is serviceable, but he's not bad. But then, as I mentioned earlier, when you get into Zach Thompson, Bryce Wilson, and Mitch Keller, that's where you're getting a little bit more into the realm of, okay, these guys need to really take that next step forward. And as I mentioned before the break, I'm going to start with Mitch Keller. I know a lot of you, New York Bucks fan, I see you on Twitter all the time. Dude, I know you love Mitch Keller. We've seen some things from him this offseason. He's done pretty fine. I mean, we've seen him in the training sessions. He threw over 100 miles per hour in a session. Looks great. His motion looks great. Everything looks great. But at the end of the day, it still hasn't translated to what we want to see on the mound in games. And if you take a sample size of Mitch Keller, for the most part, if you take a sample size of his career, he's dealt with injuries, he's dealt with not having a full season, he's dealt with all that, right? On his career, he's a 6.02 guy. It's not good at all. He had a 6.17 last year. He got sent down to AAA. A lot of stuff. But he's even on the record as saying that he learned a lot from getting sent down to AAA. And that's something now where, as Gary mentioned, we were talking about the varying levels of the system. AAA is not just going to be a graveyard anymore. There's going to be real players down there for Pittsburgh and Indianapolis that are going to be making impacts on the MLB roster this upcoming year, depending on how things shake out. So Mitch Keller, this is really his last chance. I would say this is his last chance to make a real impact and make a real statement to say, I am going to be a part of this rotation for the foreseeable future. And if he doesn't, you really have to think as a Pirates general manager and Ben Cherington and the brass of the organization that it's time to move on. Because you have, like I mentioned already, all these other pitchers that are coming up. And then behind them, you're going to have Bubba Chandler and Anthony Solometto. And behind them, you're going to have this draft class that you're going to have this year. Mitch Keller, you don't want him to end up like Cole Tucker and just get lost in the fold. But he may very well do so. Now, how does he improve? Improve the command on the fastball, obviously. Give yourself a go-to breaking pitch. He has not done that yet. He needs to have a pitch that he can say in a 1-2 count, I can go to my changeup, I can go to my curveball, I can go to my slider, and I'm going to get an out from it. And I'm just being honest here from what I've seen from Mitch Keller across the course of his career. I have not seen him do it. So if he can really establish that, if he can establish those two things, command on the fastball and a very good breaking pitch, I think he'll be just fine. But the third thing is just look a little more animated, dude. Look a little more animated. Look like you're more into it. I will say there's sometimes he just looks like, all pitchers have to do this. They all do the same motion 95 times a game before they're pulled in the 6th or 7th inning, or the 5th inning. At the end of the day, yeah, they do look kind of animatronic. They look like robots. But at least have some emotion to it, man. Like, pump your fists when you get a strikeout. You know, like, show the guys around you that you're really into being on the mound that day. And also, last year, one of the things I think that this whole pitching staff is going to use to their benefit, and they didn't lose a lot of it, except Jacob Stallings, which I was kind of unsure about. The Pirates were tied for the best fielding percentage of all teams in baseball with the Houston Astros. So use that defense. Use that defense to your advantage. If you have balls getting hit in play, know where Ke'Bryan Hayes, who's arguably the best young third baseman in baseball defensively, use that to your advantage. Kevin Newman was a Gold Glove finalist. Brian Reynolds, Gold Glove finalist. Ben Gamble, not a bad year. Should have probably at least garnered some of it. Arguably had the catch of the year last year. Then you're going to have these guys like Kenneth Smith and Jigba, Diego Castillo, who are going to be very good defensively. Yoshi Tsutsugo, whatever. But the DH is coming. So maybe you flirt with Michael Chavis at first. This defense is going to be very good. So the pitchers need to use that to their advantage. But at Mitch Keller, I know he only pitched 5 games in 2020. Go watch film of Mitch Keller in 2020 during the COVID year when he had a 2.91 ERA and was actually doing very well for himself. Go watch that film and then watch the film of what he's done this offseason and imagine this. Again, shout out to New York Bucks fan. You were awesome. I know you love Mitch Keller, and you probably know this already. But if you were to mix what he did in 2020 to what I've seen this offseason, you got a real nice pitcher on your hands. But that's just Mitch Keller. So who are some other guys? I definitely think Bryce Wilson taking the next step would be nice. It'd be nice. Does it happen? Who knows? Because at the end of the day with this too, I could say this all day. The pitchers that make the most impact need to be boom, boom, boom. Miguel Ujiri might end up coming out here, pitching with a 3 ERA, 2-1 strikeout to walk rate. Makes the most impact. Boom, you got another starting pitcher. Because right now, as you guys know, I love to use this analogy, throw in the darts. You're throwing the darts right now. And you're just trying to hit on something. And that's the thing that the Pirates have done well already, is they've already given themselves a plethora of different options pitching-wise. I named Mitch Keller and Bryce Wilson, but I could name Zach Thompson, Cody Bolton, Miguel Ujiri. I can name a lot of different guys that need to make the most impact. And this isn't even counting the guys that are going to probably end up being in the bullpen alongside David Bednar and Chris Stratton to help service the bullpen as well. Because that's going to be a big thing too. And we'll talk about that later as we get closer to the year, about the bullpen being an integral part of this team improving, because the starting pitchers, if they have the confidence to know, like they did early last year in 2021, that they have Richard Rodriguez and David Bednar in their bullpen to hold their lead, that's going to give them a lot of confidence, and confidence will be key with these pitchers. But I will say my final answer, though, is still Mitch Keller. I think Mitch Keller is arguably the last puzzle piece to what the Pirates initially thought they had. And now they're adding Roansy Contreras, Miguel Ujiri, Cody Bolton. And there's some other expected names that could be pretty fun. And we're going to get into that as well. And guys, just so you know, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline.net. Hopefully you all bet on Sidney Crosby to score at least 1 goal against the pesky Philadelphia Flyers last night to get goal number 500. And with that said, football might be over for this season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props, and to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all of your sport betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right to the Olympics, coverage, and information on other sports as well. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action, and also receive a 50% welcome bonus if you make a new account. And, of course, as you already see, use the promo code LOCKEDON to receive your 50% welcome bonus. That is Locked On in all caps. Tell them the Locked On Pirates podcast and Ethan Smith sent you. And BetOnline, of course, is where the game starts. We're going to definitely be betting on the Pirates a lot when the season starts over at betonline.net. It's going to be phenomenal. I'm going to give you guys some betting predictions on other games as well. That's going to be kind of like a little segment that we have going on every single day when we get back to 5 days a week But on today's episode, it is Wednesday, February 16th. We've talked about predicting the opening day starting rotation, what pitchers need to make the most impact. But now, I'm going to get a little shaky here. Who are some unexpected names that could improve this Pirates pitching staff? Well, you've heard me say a lot of names already. You've heard me say Jose Quintana. You've heard me say JT Brubaker, Dylan Peters, Zach Thompson, Bryce Wilson, Mitch Keller, Miguel Yajure, Roansy Contreras. So if you knew that, you got 8. You got 8 guys that I've named already. Cody Bolton again. I'm going to continue to mention him. He's the number 29 ranked prospect in the Pirates system right now. And if you look at his grades and his ETA was last year. Right? His ETA was last year. I love to hear what they talk about with him, though, on MLB.com. This is straight from MLB.com/prospects. Bolton has a 3-pitch mix that trends upwards. 4, considering that he uses 2 distinct fastballs effectively. His 4-seamer is up to 97 miles per hour and thrown with high spin rate that leads to right up the zone. His 2-seamer is more in the 37 or 33 or 93 to 95 range, while he also has a good slider and changeup. Watch Cody Bolton. Watch him closely. I promise you, he's going to make an impact on this roster, albeit either in the bullpen or as a starter. I am very high on Cody Bolton. I want to see Cody Bolton do well. I think he has, again, good command on his fastball. Again, he's working with a 2-seamer and a 4-seamer. I think that changeup is going to be lethal. Same thing with the slider. He has good cut on the slider. He has a smooth pitching motion. I'm very excited to see what we get from Cody Bolton in 2022. Another guy who I have actually not mentioned yet that I also liked to watch play last year, Max Kranik. Max Kranik is another guy that is in this fold, in this mesh of what the Pirates are doing. And I think a lot of people forget, Max Kranik is only 24 years old. Got a lot of young options. Cody Bolton, 23. Max Kranik, 24. Now, of course, at first glance, 6.28 ERA, 2-3 record. Cool. Scranton, PA product, by the way. Gotta love that. Shouts out to my Wilkes-Barre Scranton crowd if you're out there. But Max Kranik, of course, you got to look at the... So one thing that I usually tend to do, don't look at the record. Don't look at the ERA really either. The ERA it's an important stat, but you don't need to look at it for everything. So when it comes to Max Kranik, 38.2 innings pitched, 32 strikeouts in 38 innings. It's not terrible. Not terrible at all. A 1.71 whip could be improved on. But we also look at what he's been able to do in major. That was 1 year of Major League Baseball, and that was last year. But let me take you to what he was able to do in the minors last year. Played with 2 teams in the minor leagues last year. Of course, he played in Altoona and Indianapolis. Had a below 4.2 ERA at both spots in 15 games. About 69 innings pitched. And for all intents and purposes, he only gave up 8 home runs in those starts. It's not bad. 18 walks combined to a way more amount of strikeouts. So to give you an idea of what I like about Max Kranik, if you guys also didn't notice when it comes to pitchers, I always look at strikeout to walk rate. It's like always one of the first things I look at when I'm looking at a pitcher. As I just mentioned, in 2021, Max Kranik had 18 walks, right? In Double-A, he had 16 strikeouts, okay? He then moved up to Triple-A. Now, of course, he played more AAA than he did Altoona that year, but he had 45 strikeouts in AAA. And, of course, it dropped considerably when he moved up to the league. 9 starts, 32 strikeouts, about 4 strikeouts a game. The most concerning thing with me, though, with Kranik, but he could help improve the pitching staff on this, if he can improve on this, is his opponent's average on batting was .301. You don't ever want to see that. You don't ever want to... It just makes me laugh seeing it. You don't ever want to see that. Ever. But Max Kranik, another name to watch. I think if he can do a lot of what I said Mitch Keller needs to do, is to find some command on his fastball, limit the balls in play, and do that kind of thing, I definitely think he has a chance to fit into the mold. So now, I've thrown Cody Bolton into the fold. I throw Max Kranik into the fold of the guys that I had already named beforehand, which was about a list of 8 or 9. And then let's not forget he's a little bit older. But then you have Chase DeYoung, who had a 5.77 ERA last year. He's another guy I think that could make some real noise. Not going to get into it too much, but he definitely could make some real noise on the rotation as well. We saw him a little bit last year. You know, you saw him come in, you saw him do his thing. But at the end of the day, I don't think he's really going to make that much of a difference. I think they're going to definitely opt to want to go to the more younger guys in this department here. But then also, let's not forget, Will Crowe is also still on this roster. He was picked up from the Josh Bell deal, which was one of the first trades, if not the first trade, that was made right around when I first started this podcast. It's been a long, long road from then. Been an interesting road since that started, right? But Will Crowe even, another guy that you can look at that could make a real shot at this Pirates starting pitching staff. But I definitely think they will opt to probably move him to the bullpen as well. Will Crowe, of course, you've seen it, command issues, balls in play issues, home run issues. I don't think he's a part of the future whatsoever, but I'm not saying that he can't be an unexpected name to make an impact. Now, of course, as I just mentioned, a lot of the guys that we're talking about right now, they could make impacts in the bullpen. What's limiting them to being starting pitchers? Not a thing. You could see Chase DeYoung and Max Kranik be long relievers in the bullpen behind the guys that are there. Injuries also happen, guys. We know this. Injuries, especially to pitchers, they happen. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of names that you could throw in the hat. Me and Gary have talked about it. I've talked about it too, about the middle infielders and the outfielders. The pitching, man, there's a lot of pitching that is going to be available on this ball club heading into 2022 at the AA level, the AAA level, and the MLB level. I mean, because if you just go over the names that I mentioned on this podcast today to kind of recap, Roansy Contreras, Miguel Yajure, Jose Quintana, JT Brubaker, Zach Thompson, Bryce Wilson, Mitch Keller, Dylan Peters, Cody Bolton, Max Kranik, and Chase DeYoung. That is 12 guys to fit 5 spots or 6 spots. So you're telling me that half of those guys are not going to be pitching on the MLB as a starting pitcher. So you have to be better than half. Now, if I would have told you this a year ago, Locked On Pirates family, that we would have this as a potential problem, it's a good problem to have, by the way, especially when you're a team like this, to have 12 pitchers that you could make an argument that could be a starter on the MLB roster. Albeit they're not all the greatest. Most of them are probably below average, but at the end of the day, there's still options that you have to give a chance to. Of the 12 guys I mentioned, don't be surprised if you see all 12 pitching on the mound at PNC and for the Pittsburgh Pirates in 2022. Do not be surprised in the slightest if we go from seeing Jose Quintana to then Chase DeYoung the next day. It's very, very possible, but one thing I think this is definitely going to benefit, and this is a big reason why I wanted to talk about the pitchers today, I think this is going to benefit all the pitchers the same way. You're not going to see what happened to JT Brubaker last year happen again to a pitcher on this roster. They're not going to get tired. You're not going to see that happen, especially since they're not coming off of the COVID year. They had a full offseason and probably a longer offseason now to prepare for this year. I think that's going to help a lot. And you know who else is going to be a very integral part of helping these guys out too? Roberto Perez. Jacob Stallings was very good with the young pitchers, which I think is his biggest loss. His defense, of course, was very good. His offense for a catcher was fine. But I think the biggest loss from the Jacob Stallings deal is he kind of connected with the young pitchers really well. And that's something that Jose Quintana is going to have to pick, or not Jose Quintana, that's something that Roberto Perez is going to have to do on his own. And that's going to be very interesting because, again, you don't even really know who the backup catcher is right now. It's probably going to be Michael Perez. But at the end of the day, the Pirates are in good hands pitching-wise because of all those 12 guys that I mentioned, guess what? You still got Quinn Priester. You still got Carmen Mlodzinski. You still got Bubba Chandler. You still got Anthony Solometo. You still got Jared Jones. You still got Brennan Malone coming in the wings over the next half decade or so. So it's going to be fun watching these pitchers grow and develop here in Pittsburgh, and we will be there right along the ride. Thank you all so much, by the way, for tuning into the Locked On Pirates podcast today. You were all absolutely phenomenal. And, of course, thank you for making the Locked On Pirates podcast your first listen every day. Now, on our next episode, we are going to have Adam Bittner on the episode. It's going to be Friday. Also, do not forget that I'm going to be on Gary Morgan's Pirates Fan Forum, a part of the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network, this Friday as well. I will be on there talking about some things, but me and Adam are more than likely going to go over some more predictions as we get closer to what was expected to be spring training. But, you know, before you do that, as I mentioned earlier, now make your second listen Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets is hosted by your boy Q with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts, the same place you find mine. Guys, thank you so much. Make sure you check out this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts. And I am, of course, your host, Ethan Smith, the host who does the most. Hope you all have a phenomenal rest of your Wednesday, and I will see you on the flip side on Friday. Thank you, guys.